Sir Arnold Talbot Wilson KCIE CSICMGD was the British Civil Commissioner in Baghdad in 1918 to 1920. Wilson served under Percy Cox, the colonial administrator of Mesopotamia during and after World War I, including the Iraqi revolt against the British in 1920. Wilson was the third Member of Parliament to be killed in World War II and serving as an aircrew member at the advanced age of 55. Early life and career. Wilson was born in 1884 and educated in England at Clifton College, where his father James Morris Wilson was a headmaster. His younger brother was the tenor Sir Stuart Wilson. Wilson was tall and strong. He began his military career as an army officer the 19th of August 1903, having been awarded the King's Medal and Sword of Honour at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, being commissioned on the unattached list for the Indian Army. After he spent a year attached to the 1st Battalion, the Wiltshire Regiment in India, he was appointed to the British Indian Army and posted to the 32nd Sikh Pioneers on the 18th of December 1904. In 1904, he went to Iran as a lieutenant to lead a group of Bengal Lancers to guard the British consulate in Ahvaz and to protect the work of the Darcy Oil Company, which had obtained a 60-year oil concession in Iran and was pursuing oil exploration in partnership with the Burma Oil Company. In 1907, Wilson was transferred to the Indian Political Department and sent to the Persian Gulf, where he served as a political officer. Wilson oversaw the discovery of the first oil site in the Middle East, Masjid-i-Suleiman, in 1908. Soldier and senior administrator as Consul General of Mahamra, he was put in charge of the Turco-Persian Frontier Commission. He looked like the traditional figure of the Indian Rebellion of 1857 in a top-buttoned bright red tunic, the Indian Army uniform. His flashing eyes, his beetling eyebrows, his close-cropped hair, his biblical quotations are recalled Gertrude Bell, the British Oriental Secretary. Wilson was a hard worker, a workaholic, who was tirelessly energetic, shifting mountains of paperwork. He inspired a younger colleague, Harry Philby, while Hubert Young, a favoured subordinate, found him domineering. In January 1915, as the British were moving troops from India into Mesopotamia through the Persian Gulf and Basra, Wilson was designated as the assistant, and then deputy, to Sir Percy Cox, the British political officer for the region. Based in Baghdad, he then became the acting civil commissioner for Mesopotamia. The problem remained that there was no official Arab policy. It had not been defined in law nor by the civil service. India wanted Mesopotamia as a province, but Arabists from Cox downwards wished for a semi-autonomous policy separate from the Arab Bureau in Cairo. Policy was made ad hoc, but Wilson disagreed. During his tenure in Mesopotamia, Wilson worked to improve the country's administration according to the principles he learned in India. In Wilson's views, the priority was to reconstruct and stabilize the country by establishing an efficient government and administration, as well as a fair treatment and political representation of the various ethnic and religious communities. In doing so, he was nicknamed the Despot of Mespot. Captain Wilson told me the staggering news that he had been appointed to Tehran. Captain Wilson and I are excellent colleagues and the best of friends, and I know I can do a good deal by seeing people. I am going to compile an intelligence book on Persia. However, after World War I, he found himself progressively opposed to other British officials who believed that Arab countries should be granted independence under British supervision. In 1919, during the Paris Peace Conference which followed World War I, he was among the few who successfully recommended adopting the Arabic name Iraq. as it had been known for more than 1,400 years by Muslim and Arab worlds, instead of the Greek name Mesopotamia, which was only used by Westerners. This political entity covered the planned northern expansion of the newly created country under the British mandate to include the oil-rich Mosul region of Kurdistan, in addition to the Mesopotamian provinces of Baghdad and Basra. In April 1920, at the Conference of San Remo, the League of Nations agreed to the British mandate over Iraq. In the spring and summer of 1920, various riots erupted across central and southern Iraq. These riots were often violently repressed by Wilson's administration. The total number of Iraqi casualties of these riots was estimated at 10,000 people. Having achieved the rank of brevet lieutenant colonel in August 1918, he retired from the Indian Army in August 1921. In the summer of 1920, Wilson proposed a compromise, suggesting that Faisal, the former king of Syria, be offered the Iraqi throne. This proposal was intended to obtain support from the Iraqis as well as British officials who favored semi-independence. It was eventually accepted by the British government, but Wilson was not there to participate in its implementation. The British government decided not to follow Wilson's views, and instead granted independence to Iraq. The British government removed Wilson from his position in Iraq and knighted him. Deeply disappointed by the turn of events, he left the public service and joined the Anglo-Persian Oil Company as manager of the Middle Eastern operations. He worked for the company until 1932. World War II. In 1933, he was elected in a by-election as MP for Hitchin. Before World War II, his outspoken views evoked a lot of criticism. In 1938, Wilson expressed support for the Spanish nationalists, saying, "I hope to God Franco wins in Spain, and the sooner the better." The New Statesman described him as an admirer of Hitler and an unscrupulous propagandist for Mussolini and Hitler. George Orwell called him a fascist, although he also praised his courage and patriotism. However, in October 1939, after the outbreak of the war, he joined the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, serving as a pilot officer in 37 Squadron of RAF Bomber Command. He stated that, "I have no desire to shelter myself and live in safety behind the ramparts of the bodies of millions of our young men." Still an MP, he was killed in northern France, near Dunkirk, on the 31st of May 1940 when his bomber aircraft, Wellington L7791, crashed. He is buried at Erringham Churchyard, halfway between Dunkirk and St. Omer. His book, The Persian Gulf, was published in 1928. His book, S.W. Persia, Letters and Diary of a Young Political Officer 1907–1914, was published posthumously in 1941.